tuning in. Modern Day Book Reading and Explanation by Reverend Susan MeeLing. That's me. Did do a video earlier, but apparently the technology garbage issues. So, in reference to page 63, excited about my Medal of Honor art project, I took a break from typing and organizing my books to focus a bit on something different, though I had already completed organizing Finding a Silver Lining by Susan MeeLing, as well as the complementary book Finding the Silver Lining by Susan MeeLing, Reverend Susan MeeLing. Same thing, I've been a reverend since 2004. Needed to be completed in a similar format, but in a different way as well. The two books had to be separate, even though telling aspects of my life experiences while providing documentation. But the second book, Finding the Silver Lining by Susan MeeLing, allows the reader to take a break from the heaviness of the realities within the first book I wrote in reference to Finding a Silver Lining by Susan MeeLing. Reverend Susan MeeLing, I thought if I had compiled everything into a single book, that would be too difficult for people to find anything worthwhile in my life, as I already had a very difficult time as it was, and would cause too many people too many depressed thoughts. With having everything of such in two separate books, the ease of being able to flip from one to the other when needed and when ready would allow people to find something they could relate to and smile about, despite the fact of what my life has been up to this point and even at this point. Though I did not know at the time there would be legalities for certain aspects I wrote from things I had been told, hence my return to the state of Texas. If one were to only read Finding a Silver Lining by Susan MeeLing, Reverend Susan MeeLing, I thought people would instantly be upset and have rash reactions. But if one only read Finding the Silver Lining by Susan MeeLing, Reverend Susan MeeLing, then the thoughts would only be that I was making fun of everything. And that was my purpose for the two books being separate, to balance each other for each reader who might pursue and peruse through the pages. Though I decided to try doing stand-up comedy later in Seattle, as I had already tried when I was in Arizona in Scottsdale, the experiences were different. As a side note, in reference to when I was in Arizona and I was approached by someone who had a San Antonio phone number, when I started talking about San Antonio, my now ex-boyfriend Jesse Leroy Hoover Jr. started standing closer to me to listen to what I was speaking about with the mail. When I said certain things similarly to when at Carrollton Farmers Branch Independent School District in Carrollton, Texas, when Philip Olmsted, or Philly Olmsted, also known as Darko or Donnie Darko on FetLife at that time, of kicking my leg underneath the table when speaking with the board members at CFBISD, or Carrollton Farmers Branch Independent School District, Jesse Leroy Hoover Jr. cleared his throat a few times before stepping on the back of my heels when I didn't notice him. As I tried to continue to talk with the male that was from San Antonio, then Jesse leaned down towards me and whispered in my ear, "Remember, no one needs to know." The next week I had gone to try the open mic night again. I did okay, but was shortly before Jesse Leroy Hoover Jr. conversation at the resort before going to Washington State. By the way, whichever cherubim that were along with Kevin and had to do with that, thanks, sarcastically if you can't tell, because if it wasn't for that whole, I have this thing about firearm safety and had gotten a storage unit to put stuff in. He said he had put the firearm in that climate-controlled unit But after that discussion at that comedy mic night, I was informed that the firearms were in the room but wouldn't tell me where. And so if you are related to my biological family, or you're related to my son and daughter, and you had something to do with that with my dead ex-husband, you put your nephew into that situation. Despite the fact that you apparently had a problem with me, Mary Evangelina Nichols Osteen and Susie Marie Nichols Lopez, obviously you didn't care enough about the safety of my children because they're my children, despite your brother's biological assistance in that only, because he never was a decent father ever. And if you don't like that reality, you have the proof from multiple people who could probably testify, not just me and what I wrote as truth, because it is truth, but also because you were told he stole valor, and that doesn't change that. And if, in reference to Mary Evangelina Nichols Osteen, you went and decided to tell a bunch of people in Georgia some sob story because, as you said, you're so much prettier than me, like I didn't hear that from my biological sister growing up for years. You lied to them, and they probably, I don't know, maybe there's somebody who was in the army that could look at that dress blues uniform and be able to tell your brothers / freaking spiritual husband stole valor. I don't think it takes a head injury to figure that out. Maybe there's more than one person in the army for the United States of America. Who to bring in thug? It's only called an army for a reason. There's brigades, right? There's more than one person in a brigade? Probably. At the open mic night in Seattle, Washington, I had a few different topics I was going to go over, but there had been a female there named Rebecca Schrader, which obviously that proves the cognitive issues from that head injury on Sunday in 2000, who spoke with Jesse Leroy Hoover Jr. and I because of what we discussed, meaning Rebecca Schrader and I in the front of the smoking section, instead of what I had planned to talk about at the open mic comedy. I defended her for not being able to speak to the crowd because they booed her off the stage. However, when another comic went on stage and said he had been in the Marine Corps for the United States of America's Armed Forces, I said from where I sat, "Thank you for your service," which I was not being sarcastic, which he laughed at and said negative comments about the lack of importance to his time. And I said, if it wasn't for the soldiers of the United States of America, your constitutional rights to be on that stage would be null and void. If it wasn't for the soldiers who have and do defend our nation and our way of life, you wouldn't be able to be trying to be able to be a comedian. He waved his hand at me and said, "Okay, whatever." And I said, no, if it wasn't for the soldiers you have a problem with, you wouldn't be able to be free enough to speak. You wouldn't have freedom of speech. You wouldn't have the rights you have in this area of the world in this era. Jesse Leroy Hoover Jr. kicked my leg underneath the table, leaned in towards me saying, "Do you have to be so patriotic?" The same way that my dead ex-husband had yelled at me because I saluted the American flag and the graduating soldiers of the Texas National Guard during the national anthem as Cactus Jack, aka Jeffrey Kirkendall Jr., stood there and agreed with my now dead ex-husband because how dare I salute the American flag as well as all the soldiers during the national anthem. Yup. How dare I do that, being all patriotic and stuff? Maybe there's a pattern of behavior in reference to my Medal of Honor art project and that whole thing. And if there were a bunch of cherubim, hypothetically as there were, who caused problems for my Medal of Honor art project, because how dare I be patriotic? Who are you, cherubim, to tell me what I can and cannot do? Nobody is the answer. You're nobody to me, cherubim. Later, when I met with Rebecca Schrader at the Aliki Beach for coffee while at a coffee shop, the following time, whenever it was after the open mic night, which had been the week after Robin Williams passed away, and she wanted to get together to talk, I brought a copy of Finding a Silver Lining and Finding the Silver Lining with me. That had been after sending my books to the Library of Congress, which was also after publishing the books through Amazon's self-publishing service, of which she, meaning Rebecca Schrader, if she had done so to reach out to contact me in order to get a copy of those books instead of simply buying them, I don't know. Does a plane ticket from Texas to Washington and back, including the hotel stay, is that more expensive or less expensive than buying the 2 books at that time? Probably less expensive to have bought the books. Didn't think it took a head injury to figure that out. And if she did so, instead of going through the correct channels to then annoy the different courts of the legal system, whether FOIA, FISA, or whatever else, while hypothetically lying about things to the various law enforcement agencies of the United States of America's government, while not telling them how she got the books to begin with, I guesstimate there would be legal ramifications beyond just the stalking aspects of the legalities and penalties thereof. There was nothing in my books which slandered any of the females in what I wrote, as well as inserted their documents that they gave in the portions of the books which had any mention of those 3 females who lost my daughter at the Fort Worth Zoo during the field trip of 22 April 2010, as they had been put into writing by those 3 females, as well as the others who gave their statements to McCoy Elementary School, as well as Carrollton Farmers Branch Independent School District. And they had to legally give me copies of that, even though it took me months of repeated requests to get any of the responses. Sound familiar in this time? In reference to what was going on with my daughter. Also adding to the fact they did not give their statements to the school, meaning those 3 adult volunteers, until 17 May 2010. So if the excuse for Rebecca Schrader and or Marcy Creemans and or Sarah or Kim Brown felt the need to go to where I was after they had done what they had done, and not telling me who they were truthfully, not just in name, because obviously I have made my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, as well as the after effects well known, well, they chose to stalk and harass me, hypothetically speaking, among others. If the females thought I had stalked them, they had chosen to put their physical addresses of their own free will into the school handout book, which I was given a copy of, as were many other parents at that time. And yes, I mailed a letter to inform those 3 females as well as the school and the school district of the legal action coming, and nothing more as far as any threat. By technicalities, if those females chose to stalk me as well as my children, harass me as well as my children, while continuing on to prove their disrespect for the military and those of, as well as their discrimination against veterans, active duty, National Guard, and reservists of the military, because don't forget, there was that Carrollton Farmers Carrollton Farmers Branch Independent School District Board meeting in June of 2010, where instead of the school district doing the Pledge of Allegiance, they chose to read the Our Father prayer. I didn't think it took a head injury to figure out at a public school run by the state of Texas, they're supposed to do the Pledge of Allegiance and or the pledge to the state of Texas's flag, but instead that independent school district of Carrollton Farmers Branch chose to say the Our Father's prayer, which if anybody does not believe that was an attempt to intimidate me, please. And, I mean, as a reverend, not forgetting my upbringing and the way I grew up and where I grew up, saying the Our Father's prayer really wasn't difficult for me. And if you look at my Medal of Honor art project, I kind of wrote the Our Father prayer a whole bunch of times, because per Medal of Honor recipient that has the cross marker on the Medal of Honor marker, I'm just saying I didn't write the Our Father prayer one time per Medal of Honor recipient. I wrote it in a spiral, so that doesn't take a head injury to figure out. That would mean I wrote the Our Father prayer more than one time per Medal of Honor recipient with a cross on its marker, and it wouldn't take a head injury to figure out that I didn't have to tell anybody at Carrollton Farmers Branch Independent School District or McCoy Elementary School that I had been a reverend since 2004 or 2005, registered with the Universalist Unitarian Church through the email address of susan.meeling@gmail.com. By technicalities.
And while I did not research them online to stalk them or harass them
The way they did myself and my children, there are examples of such patterns of behavior for me. For example, when dating Scuba Sean and that relationship ending, Mary Evangelina Nichols Osteen and Susan Marie Nichols Lopez, I didn't go online or go talk about it with a bunch of people. When the relationship with the male who claimed to have graduated from Louisiana to become an anesthesiologist, who has ending his marriage with his former wife and had, been nice to their daughter, Haley, I did redo the bathroom because I was gonna do it anyway, because it was a Jack and Jill bathroom setup, and I didn't think that once they got into, realistically 5th grade, it would be a good idea to have the Jack and Jill bathroom set up, so I just figured get it over and done with right off the bat, and it'd be simpler instead of, middle school time frame. So,
But I didn't go on and on about that end of that relationship.
That's another pattern of behavior. And despite Scuba Sean coming back into my life back then and saying that I moved on quickly, even though it had been several months since he broke up with me. Maybe, just maybe, his temper tantrum that he had that I didn't talk about back then would be an example of another pattern of behavior. And then at the time of dating Lawrence and that'd be another pattern of behavior of not discussing the end of that. And then another pattern of behavior would be in reference to who I was engaged to twice, Sean McCall. Didn't talk about that with anyone either time when that relationship ended. Another set of patterns of behavior. Then, while in reference to Philip or Philly Olmsted, who went by Donnie Darko, Donnie or Darko on FetLife at that time, or Patty Patrick Kennedy, known as Alpha Gen X on FetLife at that time, those two would be the example of only when my name was brought up or a reference was made specifically about me on a public forum did I ever say anything to defend myself. Same thing in reference to Joey and Meg Estes. Not just the whole not going to the Crossroads for a month because that was the only place they ever went to go to events or parties, whereas I had gone to events and parties all over the state of Texas with the exception of Houston, but knew some people from there. Figure that's a pattern of behavior looking back as far as giving space and not discussing stuff at that time with anyone. Another example of the not discussing stuff would be Matt from scuba diving. So I have this pattern of behavior where I don't usually discuss my relationships or make them known until the other person or people in one situation's case and I choose to agree to such. But I also do not go and discuss the end of the relationship with just anyone or everybody. Because I have this thing where the relationship between the other person and I is exactly that. The relationship between the other person and I. It's nobody's business but ours, and if we choose to make it public, then we choose to make it public. If we choose not to, we choose not to, and it's nobody's right to get involved and, for example, with my biological mother, threaten to make online dating profiles for me without my permission and without my consent. Same thing with Alicia, Discordia on FetLife, or Erica in real life. Their threats to make online dating profiles for me against my choice, want, desire, or need. I want to go on a dating website, I will go on a dating website. If not, I won't. If I want to be in a relationship, I will be the one who puts it out there. If I wasn't, and at that time, ready for a relationship, or if I was in a relationship and it was nobody's business with me, or then it's exactly that. Believe it or not, for some individuals, I'm actually quite a private individual. I am very honest and open about a lot of things, but my relationship with whoever I would be dating is only that. I do not appreciate individuals getting involved when they have no right to. For example, Kevin, no, bullshit, at Cowboys Dance Hall.
And no, I did not view FetLife as a dating relationship website.
Believe it or not. Figured it was a social media website. And if interested in a relationship, I would state such, which I had, I don't deny that, when I wanted to, and when I was. But yes, I'm actually quite private and reserved, despite finding a silver lining and finding the silver lining. So thanks for tuning in. That's a quick little reading from the Modern Day Book by Reverend Susan MeeLing. Go to my website, www.susanmeeling.com. Go through all the different pages. Find the links to purchase my books.
Read my journal blog, the Ornery PSA.
Click the donate button to donate through PayPal. See what I've done as far as my Medal of Honor art project. Subscribe to this channel and all that stuff through the YouTube.